Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen, to the full movie of What If Deku was an Otsutsuki. Now, for those of you guys that hit the like button on the last video, I am so sorry that it took this long to make. I was just waiting for the art for this thumbnail to be done, which took a little longer than expected because I'm also working on this video right here, which should be coming out this Saturday or Sunday. Fingers crossed. Anyways, though, I just quickly wanted to thank you guys so much for the support that you guys have given this thumbnail in part 1 and 2, and I hope I can deliver for the finale of this video. So, if you guys go on to enjoy this video, then hit the like button because we're going to be going for 1,500 likes this time. You guys smashed 1,000 in part 1 and 1,000 for part 2. So let's see if you guys can break a brand new like goal you guys haven't hit in a long time. With that said, skip here if you've seen parts 1 and 2, and if you haven't, then lucky you because you get even more content. So enjoy. We begin our story off in a distant planet in the galaxy. A young Izuku in Otsutsuki years would be flying around his world, making his way home from the Otsutsuki Academy. I'd like to think that they have some sort of weird home planet where they all go back to base and like they kind of have like this academy where they teach them how to destroy planets and stuff like that. Like they're kind of just warmongering kind of like creatures that just go around decimating planets and sucking the energy out of them for the chakra fruits. And that Izuku just so happens to be part of this school because he's like one of the younger Otsutsuki, which obviously means that he's not going to be the son of Inko or Hiyashi. In fact, in this timeline, I thought it'd be kind of a funny twist if I was to make him the son of Kaguya Otsutsuki, and that the events of the story could happen kind of like as an alternate timeline type thing. You get what I mean? But anyways, as Izuku would get home putting his things down, he would go over towards his mother and she would ask him how it went. He would tell her that things went great, as she would go on to tell him that she has great news. She would go on to explain to him that she has pretty much gotten him his first planet to conquer, explaining that it should be a weak planet and it should be a good starting point for him, considering that not many of the other Otsutsuki are going to have a planet lined up immediately. But because she's his mother, she pretty much has access to, pulling a couple of strings for him. She'd pretty much be like, "Are you excited?" Kind of like in a monotone voice. And Izuku just kind of looks at her and he's like, "Yes, ma'am." As she would like look at him, she's like, "You don't seem excited." Izuku just stares at her and asks, "Why do we do this? What need is there for us to go to other planets and pillage them, steal the fruit that the planet will produce and leave? Why?" And she would look at him and say, "Are you questioning the Otsutsuki god?" But Izuku stares at her and he's like, "No, I wouldn't. I didn't. But Mom, is it really that wrong of me to just want to know why?" She would look at him and say, "The reason we do it is because we were ordered to, and it increases the strength of our planet." Izuku would nod, saying, "I understand," as he would just kind of sit there and she would say, "Next time, pretend to be happy." Izuku in this moment would kind of just like sit there and like she goes to like her room. I'd like to think that there's like an Otsutsuki society. They all live like in these massive white pods with these like super alien looking houses, maybe like an Namekian style house. But anyways, the time would finally come where Izuku would be told to go conquer this planet and that he has about 10 years to do so, saying that she's giving him plenty of time. Izuku at this moment would look at his mother, nod, as he would begin to fly through the galaxy in search of the planet Earth. When Izuku would find it, Izuku would stare at it as he would think, "It's beautiful. It's so different from the Otsutsuki world, where the sky, in my eyes, probably has like a purple hue to it, and is kind of like, it just looks polluted, and the ground is like red or something like that, with like the little Namekian style houses, and it looks super, super modernized technology-wise and stuff like that." But Izuku, looking down on this planet with one red scythe in hand, would fly down onto the planet, arriving quickly in Japan, where Izuku, looking downward, seeing this massive looking city with a population of multiple people walking around doing their own things, Izuku would stare down at them thinking, how interesting these creatures are. As Izuku definitely, even though he's not exactly like a evil Otsutsuki, he's still an Otsutsuki at the end of the day. So Izuku, looking down, he would think of these beings as being lesser than him. So as he would watch them on for a few moments, this is when suddenly somebody would look up and notice him pointing a finger. All of a sudden, chaos would emerge as the population would start freaking out, running away in tandem. Izuku staring down, thinking that it's absolutely insane that the Otsutsuki reaches even to this backwater planet. Someplace like Earth even knows about him. And as Izuku's sitting there going, they must be screaming about me, Izuku wouldn't actually be realizing that the person that they're actually freaking out about would be some stupid squid villain that was rampaging with his quirk using the drug trigger. Izuku in this moment, looking downwards, would then spot somebody coming in out of nowhere with the blue and red outfit. This would be All Might, who come rushing in, would smash the villain and send him flying into the air with a gust of wind being created from his punch, as Izuku would stare on being like, whoa, I guess I didn't expect this backwater planet to possess such strength. No matter, he's still weaker than me. It's at this point that Izuku would glide down to see All Might, who then pretty much thanking everybody and catching a glimpse of Izuku like locking eyes, would kind of just do like a gotta go as he would rush off to go stop some more crime elsewhere. But Izuku, following All Might closely behind, would end up pretty much catching him about to de-transform, his time limit about to run out in approximately a couple seconds, as Izuku staring at All Might would say, "You there, what's your name?" All Might looking at him would go, who are you? No time for fans right now. Sorry, I've gotta go. But as All Might would try jumping off, Izuku would be right at his side going, I asked you a question. As All Might staring at Izuku would be like, kid, you're persistent, ain't ya? Alright, fine. He'd start bleeding from his mouth as Izuku, quickly taking note of this, would watch on as the both of them would land. Izuku in this moment, then staring at All Might, would ask him what exactly this planet's deal is. All Might staring at him and being like, what are you talking about? And as Izuku would go on to ask him more and more questions, All Might would stare at him going, are you serious? When suddenly, he would transform into a small Might form, going, look kid, I don't exactly have the time for pranks right now, so why don't you go waltz off somewhere else and try to stop using your quirk? You know it's illegal to use your superpowers out in public. But Izuku hearing that from him would tell him, how dare you speak to me like that, you Earth scum? As All Might would be taken aback by that, with Izuku not even pronouncing the name of their planet right. He would then sit down as he would look at him, seeing the color of his skin, his hair, and even his eyes. He would ask him if he's being dead serious about not knowing what this place is, and Izuku would tell him why in the world would he lie. It's at this point that All Might would ask him if he's really a villain to answer one question. Is he here for peace or war? Izuku in this moment would say, neither, Earthling. I'm here for the utter annihilation of your world. It's at this point that All Might would re-transform to his buff state, throwing a punch so powerful at Izuku that it would change the weather on the top of the roof. However, it'd be in this moment that Izuku, holding one hand out, would have absorbed all the energy behind that punch. Having pretty much looked at his other hand and feeling a course of energy going through his hand, he would think, such an interesting ability. It functions like a stockpiler chakra attack, yes? All Might staring at him would go, what's chakra? And Izuku staring at All Might would question him on why in the world he wouldn't know what that is. He would ask if they're so primitive they don't even understand the basic concept of that. And All Might would go on to tell him that that's not what he used, it's a quirk. Izuku, now staring at him with a bit of a confused expression, would say, alright, quirk aside, what was up with those citizens back there? When they saw me, they didn't scream. Seems to me like the only thing causing them some fear was that ugly looking Earthling. As All Might staring at Izuku would say, yeah, because he was using his quirk as a villain attack. He had attacked somebody. Izuku would pretty much crunch up his chin as he would go, oh, so you guys respond to fear and violence. I think I'm starting to paint a picture. And one more question. When you had came in and you defeated that scumbag, why is it that everybody started cheering? What was it that brought so much hope to their eyes? I want to know. All Might staring at Izuku would say, I wouldn't know what to tell you, young man. I guess they just view me as a symbol of peace. That's all I got for you, really. Izuku hearing that from All Might would question what the heck that is, as All Might would go, well, you see, it's like this. So, in our superhuman society, only a couple of 100 years ago, there was no such thing as these powers that now 80% of the population has. But one person got a power and more people got powers, and now most of us have powers. But some people like to use their powers for evil, for their own selfish purposes. Izuku hearing that would wince, as he would then get an image of the Otsutsuki god, the one responsible for barking orders at them all this time. Izuku in this moment would then stare back at All Might as he would ask him what exactly a hero is and what that entails. All Might would go on to pretty much explain to him what exactly that is, and he would go on to tell him that he wishes to see more of this hero in action. This is when All Might would tell him that he can't do it for today, he's sorry about that, but if he wishes to see another hero, he can show him. Izuku would say, very well, I'll carry you, as he would grab All Might by his outfit on the back and pick him up as if he was some sort of grocery bag. It's at this point that they would soar through the sky for a bit, and All Might would say, there should be a villain attack here, somewhere nearby. This is when Izuku, flying down, would spot a group of villains having robbed the convenience store of all their cash, flying away in a van, when suddenly, the number 2 hero, Endeavor, would come out of nowhere, flame quirk activated, as he would shoot a flash fire fist attack towards the direction of the villains. This attack would land, causing the car to start tumbling and ultimately crash, as Endeavor would round up the villains one by one, followed by people beginning to cheer and a convenience store owner having been given all his cash back. Izuku, staring at the smiles of all of these people, would think, I wish I could. But it's in this moment that he would nod his head no and just pretty much think to himself that if he was to betray the orders of the Otsutsuki god or his mother, he'd be dead meat. It's at this point that he would stare at All Might, thanking him for helping him understand this world. He'd begin flying up into the air as he would charge up a massive chakra-based attack, which is very similar to the 10 Tails bomb, as he would fly up Frieza style with one figure, conjuring this massive chakra attack. Then, once it would grow to the largest size, Endeavor, looking up at Izuku, would fly off towards him, trying to shoot fire at him. But Izuku, with one hand, would absorb all of the chakra from that attack, seeing as these humans don't know it, but their actual abilities are chakra based. That's where quirks come from. Not necessarily from eating a chakra fruit, but because chakra is just kind of all over the universe. It's kind of like the wishy-washy explanation that I'm going to be using for quirks going forward in the story. So as Izuku would absorb Endeavor's blast, this is when the energy beam in his hand would begin growing larger and larger, and he would tell them to say goodbye to their precious city and lives. However, before the attack could land, All Might, shooting into his buff form, would quickly launch to the direction of Izuku, screaming out, "Wait, young man!" It's at this point that Izuku would stop his blast for a second and ask what. All Might would tell him that he hasn't explained everything about Earth quite yet, or even the city. He would tell him that if it could hold off for just a bit longer, he could tell him everything. All Might would then shrink back into a Small Might state, not being able to hold his form much longer, seeing as he had already overused his quirk all day, for 3 hours longer. So, Izuku, staring at All Might, not seeing any lies in his eyes, would think that he has time. After all, it's not like they're going to be surviving whether he kills them next month or today. So, stopping the attack completely, Izuku would pretty much stare at All Might, saying, "I'll humor you, human." And it's at this point that All Might would go on to pretty much take Izuku on a bit of a show and tell day with a skeletal form. People would stare at All Might, with people looking at Izuku and not batting an eye. It's at this point that Izuku would ask All Might why in the world some people in this world look so strange. All Might would laugh as he would go on to tell Izuku that he's one to talk. As Izuku would say, "What's that supposed to mean?" All Might would say, "It just means that in this superhuman society, some people's looks are affected by the powers that they are born with." Izuku would say, "Oh, okay, so some of you are defective." A couple of people would listen to this, and it's at this point that a man who has a mutation quirk would look at Deku and say, "What? You think you look so pretty yourself?" As he would go on to throw a punch at Izuku. However, Izuku would catch it and crush his fist in his hand. As the man, falling to his hands and knees, would say, Wait, please, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, you're right. I am a freak. Please, mercy." Izuku, hearing the cries of the man begging for that, would smirk, as All Might, looking at him, would also plead for Izuku to please reconsider. Izuku in this moment would look at the man and say, "Fine, I'll allow you to continue living your meaningless life, but not without a permanent reminder of who you're messing with." It's at this point that All Might would stick his hand out and say, "I can't let you do that. Anything you wish to do to this citizen, please do to me." All Might, knowing the predicament he's in and that this kid is so much more powerful than him, would instantly kind of just bow down on one knee. Izuku, seeing this, would stop, telling him that there's no need, that this guy just got so lucky. It's at this point that he and All Might would end up leaving the area, and All Might would show him more of the world. Izuku would notice that there would definitely be a couple of people staring at him strangely, and All Might would explain to him that in this superhuman society, having that color skin is not exactly the normal. Izuku, staring at All Might, would say, "You know, on my planet, your color skin isn't normal." All Might at this point would tell him, "Wait up, we need to go to my hero agency. There's a couple of things that I forgot to do." Izuku would say, "You know, human, the fate of your universe rests on your shoulders, and you're thinking about work in this moment." All Might would say, "You're right. What if we just go to my house?" Izuku would say, "Your house, eh? Interesting. I can't wait to see what a hero like you lives in." All Might would take them to his big old mansion that he stays at, and Izuku, looking at the house, he would think, "This place is beautiful. It's massive. Does one truly need a place this large when you're that small?" All Might, staring at him, would say, "Yeah, I guess it looks a bit big when I'm in this form, but when I'm in this form, I think it suits me well." Izuku, staring at All Might, would say, "You look like a fool," as he would then de-transform, and Izuku would say, "Go back." It's at this point that All Might would try holding it for a second but fail. All Might would then go on to explain to him that since he's a guest at his house, he was going to be offering him whatever he wanted. He'd ask, "Are you thirsty?" And Izuku in this moment would kind of just stare at All Might as he would nod his head. All Might in this point would pour him a nice cold glass of apple juice. As Izuku sipping on this, his eyes would go wide as he'd go, "What is this concoction?" All Might would explain to him what apple juice is, as Izuku would explain that they don't have any such fruits like this in his planet, that the only things that he could compare this to would be the chakra fruit which he's going to harvest from his planet. Speaking of that, All Might would say, "What exactly is your purpose for destroying our world? Are you just doing it to do it, or is there something you actually gain? Is there somebody ordering you to do this?" Izuku, hearing that, would wince as he would say, "I'm doing it on my own volition. Now don't question me about that. But as to why I'm destroying your planet, it's simple. I'm only doing it in order to get a chakra fruit. Once I'm able to harvest that, I'll be able to eat it and my power will grow exponentially. Every world has chakra fruits. However, every chakra fruit isn't the same. Some can be weaker and some can be stronger. And from the way that I've seen your society evolve, after I take this chakra fruit, it'll probably give me such a boost in power that I may even be able to stand up to Mother." It's at this point that All Might, hearing that, would go, "So you were sent by somebody." He'd take a sip of his own drink, which I'm not going to be saying what it is, but I'm pretty sure you can get the gist of it by me saying that, as Izuku, staring at All Might, would ask him why in the world he dares question him. All Might would go on to ask him why in the world he's following these orders if it seems to him like he's not some warmongering killer. Yeah, sure, he was going to kill that guy over there, but the only reason he did that was because he had bumped into him and then disrespected him on top of that. He's sure that being looked down upon by somebody much weaker than him does not exactly feel good. And All Might would look out the window going, "I guess I understand that feeling. There's multiple people on the web that like to say a lot of things about my hero career, but you know, as the number one hero, it is my job to stay afloat all that." Izuku, then staring at All Might, would go on to explain to him how he doesn't have much of a choice in the matter, that even though he wouldn't have liked to tell the human, his hand is being forced. All Might would question, "By who? Who's making you do this? Who could be so strong that someone with even your power would shudder at the thought of them?" Izuku would look out the window as he would then pretty much go on to explain to him that in his society, there exists the ultimate being, the Otsutsuki god, saying that legend has it that he's the one responsible for absorbing most of the planets in the solar system, that many of the dead worlds were actually conquered by him. All Might, hearing that, would go, "I've heard about that, but I can't believe it's true. So then that theory that those worlds used to be thriving planets like this one is true." All Might at this point would ask Izuku if he really intends to destroy this world, asking if there's anything that he can do in order to avoid that, telling him that if he does that, billions of people are gonna be dying. And for what? For power? For fruits? Izuku, hearing that, would tell him that it's not his decision to make, but he'll consider maybe giving them more time, so long as they can provide him with entertainment and more of this apple juice. He would start shaking it around in his cup, and All Might would go, right away. He'd go get him some more apple juice, pouring him a cup, as he would then go on to pretty much explain to Izuku more about Hero Society, asking multiple questions, and Izuku answering them, and vice versa. At the end of the night, it'd be super late, and All Might would fall asleep unconscious at the table. The dude was overworked and was so worried that he was sweating in his sleep, having a nightmare of Izuku actually destroying the planet. Although while Izuku would watch All Might, he would wonder what exactly has the big guy so freaked out, not knowing that it was him. And Izuku, knowing that nobody was watching, would have a smile on his face as he would look out the window seeing the beautiful planet. He would think, it's a shame. I wouldn't want to destroy a planet like this. It's greenery, even its annoying people. It's kind of endearing. He would look around, and it's at this point that Izuku, looking out the window, would see a random woman walking down the street, as a slight blush would appear on his face, and he would think, even the women are beautiful. It's at this point that, staring back at All Might, Izuku would consider whether maybe there's a chance that he could lie to the higher-ups, telling them that he had conquered the world and potentially simply train his chakra to get stronger while he's here. I mean, the likelihood of that happening would be hard, but not impossible. So, as Izuku would ponder this, he would stare at All Might as he would fly up into the sky, exploring the planet on his own. He traveled different continents, seeing the different climate changes that happen in the world, and all by morning, before All Might would wake up, Izuku would be back at the house, with All Might waking up going, I am here! Young man, is there anything that you would like for me to make you for breakfast? Izuku, looking at All Might, would question him on what the heck that is. As All Might would look at him and go, you've never heard of breakfast? No, I don't. And what's with the look on your face? It's almost as if you've forgotten that we come from two different worlds. All Might, then staring at Izuku and then remembering that he is an alien, would be like, right, sorry, sometimes I forget that you don't come from here. Well, breakfast is, we eat in the mornings when we wake up, usually followed with pancakes, eggs, bacon, this stuff. He pretty much shows Izuku a plate, and Izuku, seeing it, would like poke at the eggs, being like, such an interesting food. This dude then proceeds to essentially like pick at it, and All Might's like, you're supposed to eat it. And Deku's like, this repulsive stuff? You want me to ingest this? And All Might is just like, try it. So then Izuku's all like, he grabs a piece of bacon, bro eats it, and he's just like, oh wow. Oh wow. Can you guys remember the first time you ate bacon? It's actually divine. But anyways, after eating a piece of bacon, this dude proceeds to question whether everything else is just as good. And wouldn't you know it, it definitely is, because All Might has like a private chef at his house who's pretty much the one doing all of the cooking for All Might and pretty much brings him food every single day. Instead of eating his own breakfast, he's kind of giving it to Izuku. So now that Izuku has this, All Might would just kind of look at his phone while Izuku's eating, and there's like a red alert calling for All Might's help. All Might would go into his like really buff form and tell Izuku that he'll be right back. He has a situation to take care of. It's at this point that All Might leaps off into the distance, all the while Izuku would fly off behind him nearby, not letting All Might know that he's actually coming with. And here, we would see All Might seeing this massive villain. This villain would be about to crush a woman and her child, and All Might, rushing in the way, would go to save her, successfully doing so as the monster would wave its arms, causing a bunch of rubble to fall on the bystanders and people who were watching on, going, it's All Might! You know, the people who were there watching the stuff go down. This is when a bunch of rubble would start to fall on them, and All Might, who's barely even well rested from yesterday and has a lot on his plate right now, plus he has this lady in his arm and he's been getting weaker and weaker as the years pass, would barely find himself unable to save them. And just at the final moment, a random chakra attack would be sent to the direction of this rubble, destroying it mid-air, as the citizens watching on by would say, look, it's another hero! Izuku, hearing that, would look down on them, questioning what the heck they're on about, and they would take pictures of him, asking him what his name is. Izuku, staring down at them, would tell them that his name is Izuku Otsutsuki. They would say, what? Otsutsuki something? That's so cool! Starting to take pictures of him, this whole scene would go viral, with people talking about a new hero known as Izuku Otsutsuki, or just the new white hero, Otsutsuki. This whole thing going viral would end up leading to the media discovering that some unknown hero was out there doing hero work. They would pretty much say that they don't actually know who it is and would be about to list him as a vigilante, when suddenly All Might's contacts would actually reach out to them, telling them that for the lives of every single person on the planet, do not publish that. Because if word gets out and you guys start trying to go after Izuku, our entire planet is doomed. He would go on to pretty much like rush into a room as his All Might form with the Hero Commission, informing them that they need to give him a hero license immediately, and that he's the only thing standing in the way of his planet and utter destruction. They would question All Might as the scene would go a bit grim, and they would say, "What are you talking about, All Might? You talk like he's stronger than even you are." And All Might looks at them with a serious expression, telling them that he is hundreds of times stronger than he is, that his punches could destroy and level a city, explaining that the strength of this young man is far beyond anything that any of them can comprehend. He would go on to tell them that he doesn't come from this world, and that he's actually from space, a distant planet billions and billions of light years away from here, a world named Otsutsuki. After explaining this to them, they'd all be wide-eyed going, "What? This couldn't possibly be true. The boy looks no older than 15 years old, and you mean to tell me that he managed to travel all that distance through space?" All Might would tell them that that's not the worst of it. He would go on to explain to them that he made his way here in approximately 3 months. They would all be stunned. "What? 3 months? He flew that distance of space in 3 months? All Might, he must be lying to you. Check him. He probably seems to possess some sort of alien quirk, which is why it changes his skin color, and the strength coming from it has to be quirk-based. This is impossible." But as All Might would stare at them, he would nod, telling them that they're wrong, that like it or not, the boy genuinely is a world-ending threat, and they need to treat him accordingly. They would ask how exactly he intends to take him out, and All Might would say that that's not what he intends to do. As we would then see the door open behind All Might, and out from it would come Izuku Midoriya, who, turning towards the Hero Commission, would say, "So, you plan to eliminate me? I'd like to see you try." A smile would appear on his face as he does the "come at me" motion. The characters on the Commission Council would stare at him with anger and just the look of like, "We can't do anything," as Izuku would stare at them and smile, explaining to them that if they want to even survive 1 more year on this planet, then they better do everything he tells them. They would all kind of just look at him and ask what his conditions are, and this is when suddenly a bullet would be shot at Izuku, somebody from the Hero Commission trying to take him out after having been signaled by the Commission. However, when the bullet would hit Izuku's skin, it would bounce off of him as though nothing had happened, leaving a slight scratch on his skin. Izuku, then turning his attentions towards him, would activate his Byakugan as his eyes would change, and staring directly at the invisible person responsible for that shot would then drag him towards him, using one of his powers very similar to the Rinnegan's ability to push and pull objects, as he would drag him towards him by his neck. Then, a few seconds later, the man would stop struggling, as his entire being would have been turned into a chakra fruit, one so small that it looked like a seed. Izuku, holding it out in front of them, having transformed him into like this very, very minuscule thing, would look at them, explaining to them that this is the fate of their entire planet if they dare to try to pull something like that again. All Might, seeing this, knowing that he could not have stopped that guy from dying, would just kind of look at Izuku, hoping that he would stand down. Izuku, then staring at All Might and seeing the look in his eyes, would eat the seed, as he would say that that thing tasted putrid. The chakra levels was so low that it was embarrassing. He would turn to them, telling them that their world is so unbelievably weak, he nearly feels sorry for them. As he would go on to explain to them that from this moment onward, they're gonna do every single thing he wants, because he's the only thing standing between them and their entire planet's destruction. Every single pitiful life on this rock will perish and become his power, if, of course, they defy him. So, then staring at the Safety Commission, he would see them bow down, as he would go on to explain to them that for now, what he wishes to do is be one of those heroes. They would all be shocked, going, "What?" With Izuku looking at All Might, who also has a shocked expression, and him pretty much telling him that, yeah, he saw how fun it looked to do what he was doing earlier, and it seems as though it's a pretty good excuse to beat down on some people, so that's what he wants to do. Be a hero. All Might, staring at him, will tell him that that's it. with Izuku telling him that yeah, he wants that, breakfast, and a whole lot of apple juice. And All Might just looks at Izuku explaining that, okay, that's done. As we would have Izuku have like a fake license, like a social security number being printed out, like a fake little hero license thing, which is going to be more like a provisional hero license. And they're going to cover in the media pretty much saying that instead of a new hero, that was somebody that was working on an internship with All Might, somebody who still hasn't even yet to make it to UA quite yet. As Izuku would go on to find out about a hero school and how it works, and how at this school they're taught how to be heroes and what to do and all this stuff. And Izuku, hearing about that, would want to actually attend, curious to find out what this school is like. Having just finished graduating his own Otsutsuki school, he wants to know what these earthlings do, not knowing that this is definitely not no normal school. But he kind of is, because he's going to be learning reading, writing, math, and all that stuff. But you know, he would if that's what he wanted, because whenever he gets the test, he's gonna be like, what is this, you filthy human? How dare you give me these questions? Or something along those lines. But anyways, after this conversation with the Hero Commission, Izuku and All Might would leave the building, with All Might staring at him, asking him why in the world he would want to enroll in some hero school, with Izuku saying that that wasn't even his intention, but I mean, he'll do it. It's not like he has anything better to do. Then All Might, staring at Izuku, would have a sweat drop coming down his face as he would think, what have I just gotten those kids into? Knowing that he was just about to become a teacher at that school. So, over the course of the next 10 months, Deku would literally be taught more or less more about this hero society, how it functions, and also would kind of start learning to live on his own, becoming way more passive than how he would be when he had first arrived, kind of being docile by the fact that he has a friend in All Might and is, you know, being given everything and anything he wants. I mean, who would want to leave this planet? Deku's being treated like royalty just for existing. So Deku would kind of just go with the flow of things until finally the first day of UA would come around, and with Deku being allowed in just thanks to All Might's poll and the Hero Commission kind of understanding, hey, if we don't do whatever this kid says, we're all dead. They would just allow Izuku to pass off of the grounds that he's him. So all of the hero students going into this year of UA would all pretty much be informed that in their classroom, there's going to be a student that they are not to mess with under any circumstances, explaining to them that whenever he seems annoyed or anything like that, they need to cut anything out instantly. They'd go on to explain to them with a lie, saying that he has a very unstable quirk and a lot of things can set him off, forcing him to go berserk mode. So with everybody thinking that, oh, you know, Deku's like a bit of like a freaky character who can't control himself, they'd all kind of just look at him a bit weird. So that is not exactly the best like result that they were searching for, but it is what it is. They're kind of too far gone to do anything about it. So as Izuku would walk inside of the classroom with his Otsutsuki outfit on, not wanting to put on the whole little school outfit, Izuku would sit down towards the front of the desk and just simply wait for the class to start. All Might having pretty much practiced with Izuku what it's like to go to school, and Izuku kind of understanding what it's like as well, since he did have an Otsutsuki teacher who would vaporize him if he did anything against his will. So Izuku would kind of just tell himself to listen to whatever the teacher tells him and just go with the flow other than that. That unless he disrespects him, there's no reason that Izuku should care or not care about these human affairs. So everybody else would finally come into the classroom, and they would all look to the direction of Izuku, wondering what exactly his deal is. Izuku sitting there in the class and simply staring off into space, seemingly lost in thought, because at the moment he'd be thinking about the consequences of what he's doing. Because sure, he's having a lot of fun and being treated like royalty, but he can't exactly waste time. His mother had given him 10 years to complete this mission, and unless he starts to get on the move, his mother will probably come down to this planet and check up on him. And if that happens, then there's no way he can stop her. None of the heroes could stop her. Suddenly though, Eraserhead would stand up out of his little pouch as he would turn to all of them saying, "Alright, my name is Aizawa, put these on and meet me outside." Izuku hearing this would meet him outside, refusing to put those things on, as once there, Izuku would watch everybody else arrive a bit later than him, with some people questioning why in the world he's not wearing them. Deku would simply remain silent, staring at them, giving them like a death stare, as they would all kind of be quiet and be like, "Alright, yep, noted, I'll mind my business from now on." And Izuku would kind of just sit there doing his this thing until eventually Izuku would watch on as Bakugo would be given a ball and he'd smirk thinking that he's hot stuff, going, alright, I'll put a little explosion behind him and knock him all away. He'd grip the ball, throwing it about 700 something meters with the class watching on and Bakugo just smirking. Izuku, seeing that everybody was impressed with that, would think to himself that that was nothing, as suddenly he would grab the ball and, using his insane physical strength for an Otsutsuki, because that's Deku's specialty, being an absolute beast of like a monster when it comes to his strength, he would throw that thing straight into space. Everyone watching on just like, what? With Izuku turning back to Bakugo and smirking at him, and Bakugo just going, who the hell does he think he is? He'd be about to do something, but Aizawa would stare at him, just giving him the look of, do something and I'll expel you right now. So Bakugo would kind of just stand down as the rest of the tests would be taken, and Izuku would proceed to just destroy every single record that they have, using his Otsutsuki lineage to just obliterate all the tests, eventually leading to the end of the day with Izuku saying that this school stuff on their planet was far too easy. He'd say that to him, these courses are nothing but a joke, but at least they're going to be worthwhile wastes of time. He'd be sitting in the office with Nezu, who's sipping his tea, going, ah yes, young man Izuku, well, I guess I do understand how things can be weak for you considering your immense power, but for the hero students, I'm afraid that this is going to be about the best that they can do. I mean, it's not like everybody's as strong as you are. He'd take another sip and ask him if he wants to touch his fur, as Izuku would do exactly that, be like, whoa, your fur is soft. Nezu would say, thank you very much, I exfoliate 3 times a week, as we would then have All Might barging in the room going, I am here! Izuku, are you okay? With Izuku staring at him going, it's about time, All Might, you left me here for about 15 minutes later than usual. All Might apologizing, saying that he had just needed to finish a couple of things up in a class, and him giving him like a big old bottle of apple juice. Deku staring at that thing would just be like, alright, I forgive you, as he would take the big old jug and start downing it entirely. After this, All Might would tell him that he has a gift for him, as he would hand him a phone. Izuku, being given this thing, would wonder what the heck this is for, as All Might would, download TikTok for him, and he gives it to him, just telling him to scroll, that he should find something entertaining. And so for the next hour that Deku has a commute home in All Might's limo, the dude would just start watching a bunch of brain rot, with eventually him finally like breaking out into laughter, and All Might being like, what's going on? Thinking that like Izuku was about to do something, but Izuku just sitting there laughing at the video of some guy like falling and getting hit in the nuts or something like that. So Izuku's like doing this would just start dying laughing, and then he just goes on like this binging journey, which eventually leads him to the weird side of TikTok, where it's like it's stuff he can't even understand the language of, but people are getting hurt, so Izuku's having a blast watching this. He would then arrive home, and All Might would tell him that he's now finally finished his custom room, giving him every single thing that he had asked for. And now Izuku would feel more at home. It looks almost like a replica of the room that he has as his own place. He would then tell All Might to bring him some of that breakfast, with All Might saying that today he had actually thought of getting him something else. He'd bring him this massive box of pizza, and he just sets it down on the counter, with him telling Izuku that this is pizza. Izuku would poke at it going, this looks disgusting, but All Might telling him that it's hot and fresh would pretty much rip out a slice, and it'd be like thin crust pizza, and tell him to just take a bite. Izuku at this point would look at it, just kind of like analyzing it with his Byakugan, and then taking a bite, the dude would just be like, this is, as he would devour the entire box by himself, and then we would just see All Might staring at Izuku just like, the kid he's just a teenager. He just realizes that Izuku is he's literally just a big old kid that has way too much power for his own good. You know what I mean? Which honestly makes for some hilarious content, but I digress. After this would happen, the very next day would come around, and the students would all be told about the hero versus villain training event, how they're going to be having 2v2 battles, and All Might would explain everything. And so we would get Deku being paired up with Uraraka, much like in the original, as he would face off against Bakugo and Todoroki, with All Might going up to Izuku and being like, PS, don't kill the kids, going on to tell them that this is just an exercise. If anything, just touch the bomb and it's over. So Deku then staring at All Might would nod, with Bakugo staring at Deku and just being like, can't believe that bastard can't even control this quirk is all buddies with All Might. Can't wait to knock him down a peg or two. At this point, we would now have Bakugo walking into his bomb room, as Todoroki would ask him how exactly they're going to play this. And so, Bakugo would simply stare at Todoroki, telling him not to use his stupid quirk and that he's only going to serve to hold him back. But then staring at Todoroki, he would say, but if you want to make yourself useful, then just stay in here and protect the bomb room. I'm gonna go kill that bastard. As Todoroki would stare at Bakugo with uncaring eyes, simply just waiting there knowing that he probably is gonna get the job done, but if he doesn't, he'll just have to freeze them in place and win. So, as Bakugo would fly off towards the direction of Izuku, he would scream, "Where are you, you damn nerd?" As he would come face to face with Izuku, who flaring his chakra would cause Bakugo to fall to his knees. Izuku taking a couple of steps closer and asking him who exactly he's calling a loser. Bakugo in this moment would bite his lips so hard that it would cause him to break out of the fear that he was experiencing, replacing it with pain, as he would then shoot an explosion upward at Deku's direction, with Deku absorbing it in his hand, wagging his fingers no, 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 before then kicking Bakugo like a dog across the room. Bakugo at this point would go crashing into the wall, before then a fire style would be sent towards his direction, which would obliterate the entire hallway, its force being way more powerful than even the explosions that Bakugo can create with his gauntlets. Bakugo then at this point on the ground would start practically convulsing from the pain, as Izuku would ignore him making his way to the bomb room. This is when Todoroki would attempt to freeze them, but Izuku would continue walking past, completely unaffected by the climate, as he would then drag Todoroki towards him, who, trying to use eyes to stop himself from getting dragged by creating like walls in front of him, would be unable to stop it. Todoroki would eventually come to Deku's hand as he would squeeze his neck, and Izuku would ask him if he yields. All Might in this moment watching this would be terrified, thinking that Izuku was about to kill this kid just like he did to that Secret Service worker. But it's at this point that All Might would watch on as Izuku would squeeze tighter and tighter, and Todoroki would try to shoot flames at him. It is at this moment that Izuku, using his chakra absorption ability, would render Todoroki's powers completely useless. All the chakra that's being used as a quirk being sucked in before it could even be expended out. And with Todoroki realizing that his powers were completely useless, he would kind of just look at him as his gaze would finally start fading, and he would start like kind of fading into unconsciousness. His hands would drop, with Izuku saying that they win. And Uraraka standing behind him just like, whoa, he's so strong. Izuku at this point would stare at Uraraka and say that they've won, and would go through the intercom saying that this is hardly a warm-up, going on to pretty much say, All Might, I expect you to fight me later if you want to provide some sort of entertainment. I need to be able to stretch my legs out. All Might would look at Izuku and just be like, you got it, Izuku, we'll have a fight later. As Izuku would walk back towards the direction of his classmates, who were unable to hear that obviously, and they would all question Izuku on how in the world he did that, as they would all just start glazing him, like just like, you're so cool, like you're the best, like how did you do that, like you just defeated two of the strongest quirks in our class like it was nothing. And Izuku, you know, like seeing all that attention and praise, like he knows what's going on, right? But never before in his life had he experienced it, because Izuku in his home world wasn't exactly the strongest of all of Otsutsukis. In fact, if I had to put it in like Dragon Ball terms, he's a low class like Otsutsuki warrior who's not exactly the strongest, maybe like a middle class, right? But he's not as weak as his mom, he's not as strong as his mom is, so people kind of like make fun of him for that. Like they want him to live up to her expectations, and all he has is his monster strength and the crazy abilities he was born with just thanks to his mom, which he can barely even use properly. So having received all this, Izuku would have a smile appear on his face, with All Might thinking that if he's at this school with people about his age, this might just work. There could be a chance for them to turn him onto their side. And if they can somehow accomplish that, well, then they're giving themselves a fighting chance. All right, before I start this video, I just have to say, y'all are literally my biggest ops. How in the world is it possible that What If Deku Was a Otsutsuki Part 2 has more likes on it than What If Naruto Had Won For All, a video that I worked literally weeks on, and it only has 980 likes with so much less views? You guys are ops. You guys will literally only like my videos when you guys get something out of it. Y'all will never think, hey, you know what? Let me support my boy Zether. But enough yapping. You guys are in this video, so I'm finally here to deliver. So consider liking a video for your boy. I know it took a while, but that's only because I was getting art for this thumbnail so that this part could do so much better than the rest, hopefully. So if you guys like the video, that might help a little bit. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. Anyways, getting back into the story, we had left off with Deku doing the 2v2 battles at school, and I kind of want to pick everything off with the USJ event. With the zooming in on Izuku, who's kind of just listening to 13 give her speech about heroes, until suddenly Kurogiri would appear, Izuku being the first one to notice him and staring right at him. It'd be at this point that Kurogiri would start his speech about heroes and villains, and Izuku hearing that Kurogiri was a villain, he would not think twice. Izuku would hold his palm out as Kurogiri's mist-like body would start to be sucked into Izuku's hand, with him sucking Kurogiri's chakra-based quirk and pretty much getting rid of the dude almost instantly. As we would then get a shot of All Might staring at Izuku in just disbelief at how fast he took care of that. Deku literally saw him, heard the word villain, and didn't even give him a second to monologue. All Might at the bare minimum was gonna let him say something before he punched the guy to Kingdom Come, but damn. After this, All Might would just look towards Izuku's direction, telling him that now, buffing up, or well, obviously he's already buffed since he's at school, but like being in his buff form, be like, Izuku, help me with these villains. So they like leap off, and then we just get this All Might rushing through and just starting to pound on these villains. All the while Shigaraki, who's at the middle of everything, would start scratching his neck going, what? Kurogiri, it's not fair. It's not fair. Nomu, kill the brat. As we would then get a shot of the Nomu rushing towards the direction of Izuku, only to then be kicked away, with Izuku calling it pathetically weak. As we would then get a shot of the Nomu's arm getting ripped off of its body and being sent flying directly to the ground. Shigaraki, seeing this, would look on in horror as he would stare at Izuku and would begin to uncontrollably start scratching at himself. He'd stare at Izuku with eyes that scream murder, and Izuku, seeing this, would feel so pissed off, the dude would float into the air as he would begin to charge up a massive chakra attack similar to the one that Momoshiki was charging up in the Boruto movie, as he would then launch this full-scale attack at Shigaraki, leaving All Might to just kind of sit there biting at his teeth, since obviously it's kind of the hero's code not to kill people, but what's All Might gonna do, stop him from killing a villain? That's the least of their problems at the moment. This attack would consume Shigaraki's entire body, as without a master to order the Nomu around, it would try to aimlessly follow the last order it was given, and it would ultimately lead to the Nomu being absolutely destroyed by Izuku using a barrage of taijutsu on it as target practice, loving every single second that the Nomu was regenerating just so he could destroy its limbs over and over and over again. Izuku, seeing how useful the Nomu was for a training dummy, would tell All Might that he needs to get himself a couple of those in order to maybe try to have some fun and get a workout in every now and then. All Might, after hearing this, would pretty much tell Izuku that for now, they need to go, as Izuku would stare at All Might wondering what the heck the problem was, that every time that he finishes up cleaning up a scene, he doesn't just immediately go, he indulges in the limelight. So that's exactly what Izuku was trying to do. So flying back to the direction of where the rest of his classmates were at, Izuku would stand in front of them as he waiting for the praise and admiration, and to his surprise, it kind of wouldn't come. Some people would say that he's awesome, but there'd be like a bit of a deathly silence in the air, with some people staring at Izuku and just kind of like gulping at the thought of ever having to face off against somebody of his caliber. And Izuku, taking note of this, would tilt his head, questioning what's wrong with these humans. This is when finally Mina would stand up and go, hey, why are you calling us that? You're almost pretending like you're not one of us. And Izuku, hearing him being compared to them, would kind of grimace at the thought, going, what? How dare you talk to me like I'm a lowly human, you insignificant. But before he can finish that, All Might would place his hand on his shoulder, telling him that it's not their fault, that he wasn't entirely honest with them. He would then look at Izuku and say, please allow me to explain. This is when he would break down to the class the truth about Izuku Otsutsuki, going on to tell them about the fact that he's an alien from space and he's only here becoming a hero for fun, having nothing better to do, not telling the students about the truth as to why he's here. However, this is when Izuku would tell them that they're lucky he's not destroying their weak little planet, considering all the disrespectful micro interactions he's had with a few commoners here. This is when Mina would gulp and stare at Izuku, as she would feel bad for having said anything about him. And then we'd have All Might place his hand on Izuku's shoulders, with Bakugo saying, so, you think you're gonna destroy a planet or something? Well, I'd like to see you try. Me and the heroes are gonna stop you if you even try to lay a hand on our world. And Izuku would look at Bakugo going, oh yeah? Is that a threat? as he would activate his Byakugan, and Bakugo would kind of just take a step back going, no, before Aizawa's scarf would wrap around him, and he would look at him with his eyes glowing red, telling Bakugo that if he has one more of those outbursts where he causes Izuku to even slightly get irritated, he's going to be expelled from the hero course and he's going to be responsible for the destruction of their planet. He would turn to the rest of the class, telling them to take this very seriously, that Izuku isn't some nobody they can take lightly. He genuinely possesses the power to level their entire planet if he so felt like it. As he would stare at the rest of the class, and everybody would kind of just be like, as they would all kind of understand, okay, yeah, let's not mess with Izuku. After this, we'd probably end up getting the UA Sports Festival, which would be kind of funny because I could see the teachers all kind of scared of letting Izuku participate in this, just due to the fact that there's going to be an entire crowd either cheering him on or, not giving him the praise he deserves, which is going to be horrifying for them. And they would try to explain this to Deku, telling him that it'd kind of not be fair since he's wiped the floor with anyone already, but Izuku would say that being a hero, that's all his experience has been, so what's different? He just wants to get to continue having the full experience of playing one of these insignificant heroes, continuing up his facade of not liking this world, but in reality, he does enjoy it. He just doesn't kind of want to let off the impression that he has kind of grown fond of this world and the people and their culture, their way of living their mediocre lives and thinking nothing of the way they address people. He thinks it's funny that the people here can just mouth off to whoever they want and genuinely almost never have any consequences. He would think about what would happen to him if he were to do something like that on his world, and the thought just terrifies him. Regardless though, after this would happen, we would then get a scene of Izuku giving the speech to everybody, as he would go out and flatly tell them all that he's about to put on the greatest performance these humans have ever seen. All of them would start cheering, not understanding at all what Izuku meant, seeing his skin and all those features don't really surprise them, seeing as, we kind of got Mina in the classroom. As we would then get Izuku stepping forward to start the race, and the second it would begin, Izuku using his Byakugan would track everything that's about to happen. Hearing the starter's pistol, Izuku's muscles would twitch and he'd be off, clearing the entirety of the obstacle before anybody could even realize what had happened. Before even 1/3 of the competition was frozen by Todoroki, Izuku would have cleared the whole thing and destroyed all of the 0-pointers with a massive array of explosions going on behind him, consisting of robots and the landmines that Deku would have set off purposely. This is when Izuku, now at the finish line with a smug expression, would raise his hand up, similarly to how he's seen All Might do it, as everybody would start going nuts. They're like, what? Does he have a teleportation quirk? To which some people would start noting that the robots were destroyed. He had to have ran through that. They would start pretty much speculating that he has to have some sort of super speed quirk. And this is when President Mike would go on to announce that Izuku doesn't really have a quirk that can be categorized like many others. He's an outlier. He'd then go on to tell them that Izuku possesses incredible speed, strength, durability, dexterity, and even an incredible aptitude for combat. Izuku's practically the perfect being. And the crowd hearing this would start to be like, what? There's no way. Is he stronger than All Might? A bunch of people would start questioning that, and President Mike would say, well, whether the kid's stronger than All Might or not doesn't really matter now, does it? The fact of the matter is, we're going to be having a great hero on our hand for years to come. And Izuku hearing that would kind of get a little saddened, with All Might being one of the only people to notice that from the crowd, having been the person who's kind of in charge of babysitting Izuku. Crimes have kind of been going a little more haywire just because All Might isn't around to be able to handle everything like he used to be as much, and spending all those hours doing everything else because he's practically with Izuku whenever he can be. And All Might seeing this would think that maybe this is all working. This is when Izuku then would start getting crazy praise from the crowd, praise from everybody, and the fact that they had said that he is practically invincible and a perfect being, that would have definitely hyped up Izuku's ego a little bit. So after this would all happen, Mina would go over to him and kind of just start apologizing to him, just being like, hey, I'm really sorry about what I said last time. I just really didn't know that you weren't a human. I mean, after all, you kind of look like me. She would then point out that she has a different hair color and even her skin's different thanks to her quirk. She goes on to explain that her acid quirk is nothing as compared to him, but that she wishes that they can both go on to become incredible hero. And then she looks at him and says that she hopes he doesn't destroy her world, with a bit of a chuckle and like, a little bit of like a shy, also kind of like, like laugh. She would then kind of just walk away, as Izuku, looking at her, would watch her walk away, and he would think, she's not half bad. but suddenly we would have him shaking his head going, "No, I'm an Otsutsuki, and I will not be tied down by this world. I've let these insignificant humans get in my head far too long, but now it's time to." He'd start charging his attack with All Might being worried as Mina would turn back around, smile at him and wave, and him watching her would just kind of start blushing, with Izuku just instantly powering down and waving back. This is when All Might, looking towards Mina, would be like, "That's it! This is how we're gonna get Izuku!" As we would then cut to Izuku inside of the waiting lounge with the rest of his classmates as Todoroki and Bakugo come up to him and tell him that they're gonna do their best to defeat him, whether he's an alien god or not, with Izuku smirking, telling them that they can try their best, but they're nothing but insects, insignificant beings in his eyes. He would then activate his Byakugan, and it's in this moment that Izuku would notice that Mina wasn't exactly present in the room. He would wonder where she was, looking around as he would spot her and All Might, and Izuku, noticing this, would stand up, saying to get out of his way. He would float, not wanting to walk or even touch the floor, as he would then get closer and closer to the room where All Might was at. And this is when we would cut to All Might explaining to Mina that she needs to get closer towards Izuku, that this is about saving the world, and that it seems to him that he fancies her. Mina would kind of start blushing and be like, "What? He would no, I'm a human, right?" He's like a super powerful, cool alien, and there's no way. As All Might would look at her and say that however you want to slice it, she might just be the only key that they have to protecting this world. As Mina would start blushing, and Izuku would think, "You dirty dog, All Might. I can't believe that you'd go through these messages just to try to convince me to spare this earth. But you know what? I won't fight you on it. It's not like I'll deny that I like this specimen." As he would walk off with a smirk on his face, thinking, "You sly dog. This might work though. I've got to be honest. I do fancy her a bit." As we would then get a scene of Izuku walking off and then turning the corner once again to see Mina. It's at this point that Izuku, seeing her, she would like smile at him and ask Izuku where he's headed to. As she starts walking with him and putting, her game on, she starts trying to flirt with him. But Izuku then just kind of stares at her and plays along, acting as though he has no idea what's really happening. He would then indulge with her and talk to her for a little bit, learning more about Mina, as this is when he would be called up for the 1v1 battle, because we're 100% skipping the cavalry battle because no one cares about it. He would walk onto the ring with Shinso, with Aizawa watching closely on, because he had thought that there's a possibility that Shinso's quirk might be able to be used in order to stop Izuku from destroying their world. And so Shinso would ask him a question: "Just where are you from?" knowing that Izuku would most likely answer him, unaware of what his quirk was. And so Izuku, staring on at Shinso, would tell him that he's from the planet Otsutsuki, and the second he would respond, he would be trapped inside of a genjutsu-like quirk. Izuku sees this and smirks, snapping out of it instantly, as he would stare at Shinso, telling him that that's a neat genjutsu. He would then go on to place him under his own world, where he would see the destruction, the tyranny, and the other members of the Otsutsuki, with the most terrifying creature of all of them being the Otsutsuki god. Shinso, getting one good look at this, would feel true horror, as he would stare off at the direction of Izuku, just going, "What the hell was that?" As he'd be on the ground in a puddle of sweat and a bit of blood coursing through his nose, eyes, and ears. He'd be on the ground completely unconscious, barely able to stand up, as we then get the crowd watch on, questioning what had even happened. Aizawa would be the most stunned of all, thinking that there's no way that he was able to just break out of it that easily, right? Does just nothing work against Izuku? Izuku would walk off the ring thinking nothing of it, considering this was a 1v1 battle. His next match would be against Todoroki, and the second that it would begin, Izuku could sense that Todoroki was building up power, about to shoot a massive ice geyser at him, similarly to what he would have done to their classmate Sero. So Izuku, knowing what's to come, would weave the hand signs for a massive fire-style jutsu, which would go flying to the direction of Todoroki's ice, completely melting through it and destroying it, as Todoroki himself would then be burnt and sent flying out of the arena, with Endeavor watching on like, "Shoto!" as the flames would consume his son, and he would start gripping at the rail, staring daggers at Izuku. Izuku at this point would smirk to the direction of Todoroki, knowing that that was his father, as he would ask him what's he gonna do about it. out loud. The entire crowd would hear this, and Endeavor would walk off in anger, with everyone being like, "He just challenged the #2 hero! He's him! He's him!" As Izuku would watch on at the crowd, looking up with a smile on his face, thinking that this is the most fun he's had in his whole life. Then making his way towards his stands, his classmates would start cheering him on and just kind of doing everything and anything that they can to make sure that they're all on his good side. Izuku, after this would happen, would then sit down as Mina would kind of just stare at him and wave once more, kind of unsure of how in the world to go on about this whole making him like her. She would start blushing at the thought of having to date him or something like that to save the world, as Izuku would stare right back at her with a cold glare, and she would just kind of look down as she'd be like, how am I gonna do this? This is when we would then get Izuku facing off against his final opponent, being Bakugo, since the third match would be skipped because Ida would kind of forfeit because of his brother Ingenium, but I digress. Anyways, the battle would begin and Bakugo would go in guns blazing, with this being kind of his only chance to try to get at Izuku and attack at him, but let's just say it just wouldn't work. Izuku would absolutely nullify all of Bakugo's explosions, practically absorbing them as though they were nothing, before then returning a massive firepower blow attack. This attack would destroy Bakugo, and Izuku, for good measure, would rush Bakugo from behind, having created a clone, grabbing him by the back of his head and slamming his face into the cement arena, as his face would fully crack into it and Bakugo would be fully knocked out. Deku, after having done this, would then walk away, with people in the crowd going, "What? He has an ability to make duplicates of himself?" This is when the crowd would just start going nuts and people would just start getting angry at him. They'd be like, "This is unfair, how can somebody be born and be so lucky?" And Izuku, hearing this, you would think he'd get mad because the crowd is all like, "Oh, how does he have all this?" But he's so smug at this point because he's like, "Yeah, that's right, humans, acknowledge how much better than you I am." As he'd walk away with the entire event being over and him being given first place, a bunch of people would start cheering on, with people kind of just being like, "Whatever, some people are just blessed," as people would kind of acknowledge that, yeah, some people are just going to be better than them, and that's just kind of how it is. So Izuku, after receiving his first place medal, would kind of just go on about his day, not really caring about what else happens. So we kind of just flash forward to everybody picking their hero names, with Izuku sitting down wondering what would be a proper hero name for him. But realizing that he's an Otsutsuki and he should be proud of that name, he would name himself the godly hero Otsutsuki, as the rest of the class would be like, I guess I kind of expected more. Izuku would be at the front of the class as he just lets out one of the reactions that his other classmates would have done, so as he'd be like, "Hey, I worked really hard on this," not prone to trying to destroy them, with them all just laughing and telling Izuku that, he doesn't need to take it up the butt. Izuku, hearing this, would get pissed, saying, "I'll destroy you all," as the class would say, yeah, whatever, Izuku." This is when Izuku would have a slight smile appear on his face, as he's just like, "Damn, they're accepting me." Izuku, seeing that these guys are low-key starting to become his friends, would just kind of start letting his guard down more and more, understanding that maybe these people aren't so bad. This is when Izuku would then be told about the internships, with Izuku having received practically all the internship opportunities that he could get thanks to his performance during the sports festival. But ultimately, I could see him going with Gran Torino still, just because All Might kind of needs a break from Izuku, and he thinks that it'd be a good idea to have his mentor, somebody who's probably more capable at watching Izuku, pretty much show him a couple of moves and show him that not all humans are as weak as they seem. So Izuku, flying over towards Gran Torino's to meet him, with All Might there as well, would kind of just wonder why he's here to meet this weak little old man. Gran Torino would start zipping around the room, with Izuku following his movements, as Gran Torino would try to land a kick and Izuku would throw him across the room, telling him that those attacks might work on an underdeveloped human, but on him, they will never land. To which Gran Torino would smile, telling him that that was just a warm-up. He would then start zipping around like crazy, using unorthodox movements, as Izuku, even with his Byakugan active, would actually slightly be nicked by Gran Torino. He would stare at him, asking him how it is in the world that he managed to evade him and land an attack, though they're on two completely separate leagues. As Gran Torino would start to explain to him that even though he is so much powerful than him, and he could never hope to defeat defeat him. It's the mere fact that he was using every single thing at his disposal to try to nick him. His goal wasn't to defeat him, but to show him that even a weak human like him could potentially stand a chance against him given enough time. Izuku, hearing this, would kind of have his eyes widen as he would stare at Gran Torino, asking him to teach him more. So Gran Torino, in an unorthodox way, would actually start training Izuku, not in the sense that he teaches him how to get stronger, but he teaches him techniques that Izuku never would have thought about, or ways of fighting that Izuku had just never had pop up into his mind. Different ways of fighting, more like a shinobi, and to use kind of like that heart of a human, like the human will to never give up would be something implemented into Izuku. After learning all these lessons from Gran Torino over a couple of days, Gran Torino would tell him to execute these lessons as they'd go off on a hero patrol, telling Izuku to leave something behind for the pro. As we would have a scene of Izuku carrying Gran Torino while he'd be flying in the air, using his Byakugan to spot any crimes, as he would then go on to spot Stain down below about to stab his teammate, and Izuku rushing down there with such speed that you'd be stunned, would then send a truth-seeking orb, seeing as he's the son of Kaguya, to destroy Stain right before the blade could even make contact. Stain would crumble to dust, with Izuku looking at Ida's body and feeling angry at the fact that that man was really about to kill his Clash rep. It's at this moment that Izuku would turn Ida over and ask him why in the world he was out here. This is when Ida would tell him that that was his fight, as he'd have so much rage in his eyes and he'd just start crying, saying that he killed his brother. As we would then have Ida apologize to Izuku for just like addressing him with that tone, but he just couldn't help it. He's filled with so much rage because that hero killer is the man responsible for Tensei, his older brother's death. Izuku, hearing this, would kind of sympathize with Ida, just being like, alright, I'll let it slide just this once, but that's not true. He would have let it slide regardless. He's kind of getting soft to the humans. So with this being the case, Izuku would help Ida back up, and using a bit of medical ninjutsu, he'd proceed to heal Ida's wounds up rapidly. This is when he would return back to class, and we'd have the Forest Training Camp arc, which in this timeline has literally nothing go wrong. And what's actually insane about this story is that without the threat of Shigaraki, this means that all for one, like it's not like Shigaraki was put in prison, so he's gonna go to Tartarus and like break him out, which is what he probably would do if he was in jail. But like the dude's dead, so that quirk decay and his whole plans of turning him into successor, they're kind of not gonna work. So here's what I'm thinking could potentially happen to maybe even out the scales. All for One would most likely try to make Overhaul his next successor, potentially, since he has like a quirk similar to the one that Shigaraki has. And so maybe we could get like a Overhaul becoming gnomified and like All for One trying to like take over his body over this time, after seeing the performance of Izuku Otsutsuki in the sports festival and seeing just how strong he was. We'd have him like trying to get as strong as possible with a 100% taking over All for One in Overhaul's body, him controlling the Yakuza and all that stuff instead of controlling the Liberation Army. And we could maybe get like All for One trying his luck at the heroes, maybe during the Forest Camp. But I'm not gonna lie to you guys, All for One is dead, bro. This dude is an Otsutsuki, but we're still gonna cover it, right? We've been covering everything else, so we're gonna cover this. During the Forest Camp, Izuku would arrive there just with everybody else, and as the bus would be releasing everybody, the Wild Wild Pussycats would tell them that they have about this many hours to make it to the camp and to not be late, or else dinner's gonna be very cold. This is when we would then get all the students looking downwards, as they would realize that they're having to make it back from here. They'd all freak out about this, and suddenly they'd all be launched off a cliff, with Izuku being the exception, staring at Aizawa and asking him if he has to participate. Aizawa would stare at Izuku and tell him that he actually doesn't, saying that this is going to be way too easy for his classmates if he does. So Izuku would kind of smile, as he would then willingly go down, just kind of to spite Aizawa and be like, nah, I don't really feel like doing what you say. This is when we could probably get Izuku helping his classmates out, just because he's grown a little more fond of them, plus Mina's there, so he kind of wants to show off and, you know, let her know what's up. And Mina would actually think that he's pretty cool if she's being honest. So we could maybe get a couple of like cute little scenes between him and her, but this isn't exactly some sort of like shipping what if, so I'm kind of just gonna leave all that stuff vague. But over the course of the Forest training camp arc, they'd probably have a good 3 to 4 days until eventually a bunch of portals would start opening, and we would then get All For One arriving at the scene trying to kill All Might. However, unfortunately for him, Izuku being present here would just put a stifle on all his plans, with him dealing with this just as though he would have dealt with it during the USJ. He would float up into the air as 6 truth-seeking orbs would float around him, and seeing that these guys were trying to hurt his classmates who now he actually cares about, would send these truth-seeking orbs to just destroy all of the villains that would be on All For One's side. We're talking Kendo Rappa, we're talking the dudes with like the weird quirk to like control the area and stuff like that. People with quirk destruction bullets. We got would some of the characters that joined because of Stain still be there? I'm gonna say yes. So we got like Dobby getting destroyed before he could even shoot cremation. Toga literally being killed. So these truth-seeking orbs are just wrecking through everything. And then Nomus would try to rush at Izuku, trying to like destroy him or land an attack, but they would just get obliterated by the truth-seeking orbs. Izuku using his full power instantly before then charging up a massive attack and staring off at the direction of All For One, who tries to speed blitz him with his quirk and would actually kind of do so, about to make contact with Izuku and placing his hand on him, with Izuku smirking and grabbing his hand and wrist and absorbing the entirety of the quirk. This is when Izuku would then place his palm on All For One's neck and just completely destroy it, shooting the attack right back at him. All For One would be crumbled to dust in the air, with Izuku looking on at the rest of the villains and annihilating them before they even get the chance to hurt a single blade of grass. With this being the case, even though people would have noticed that villains would have attacked, Izuku having taken care of it so fast that no one even had time to panic, they would kind of just go on to continue the events a few hours later after the police would come in and get reports about what had happened. And Izuku would kind of just be sitting there thinking to himself that if that's it, then he kind of has nothing else to do now. So he would kind of just chill in the forest and train with Momo and all that stuff. I mean, not Momo, but Mina, as we would then get a massive time skip to the final villain of the series, who would be Kaguya Otsutsuki. Years would pass and Izuku would continue living his life among the humans, with him integrating, marrying Mina, and actually literally having like a hybrid Otsutsuki kid. The Otsutsuki would be kind of sick looking because it has human skin color with like pink and whitish hair. It'd be like half pink, half white, with like the Byakugan in one eye and like the black with like yellow iris eye. He looks kind of cool, you know what I mean? He's like a 3-year-old kid, and Izuku would have actually grown up here and became an incredible hero. Like, the dude feels very human. He kind of loses the whole "you're weak human" stuff, and like 10 years into the story, like after he would arrive, we would get Kaguya arriving with Izuku sensing her chakra into the air. He would fly over towards her, with her asking Izuku why this planet is not in ashes. Izuku would look at her and tell her that he enjoyed this planet, that he met so many people, and he even married here. Kaguya would widen her eyes as she would say, "You dare! You're crossbreeding our species with these humans." She would then pretty much slap Izuku, as Izuku's head would turn and he would look at his mom saying to please not do this. But Kaguya's eyes would just kind of narrow as she would say, "You're no son of mine," and she would begin charging up an attack. Izuku would completely absorb it and tell his mother that he never wanted it to come to this, and we would get a grand finale battle between Izuku and Kaguya. In the air, Izuku would proceed to be teleported into a different dimension by his mother, as thousands of Otsutsuki clones would begin to appear, and they would all proceed to lunge to the direction of Kaguya. Like truth-seeking orbs would begin flying through the battlefield, Kaguya and Izuku trying to destroy each other with them, as we would then get Izuku having a couple of tears coming out of his eyes and implementing the final move that he could have thought of. A bait and switch tactic that would have been taught to him by Gran Torino, and something that villains commonly use. He would feint in for an attack, with Kaguya not expecting this kind of combat from her son, somebody who had never fought like that and actually looked down upon it before, as he would then lunge towards her direction and she would fall for the feint hook, line, and sinker, as she would then like bite, but Izuku would then cross her and boom, rock her across the head. This would shock her long enough for Izuku to place a truth-seeking orb straight into her gut that would kind of look like a Rasengan, as it would completely start to crumble her body. This is when Kaguya would stare at him and just kind of like look at him with rage, saying that the Otsutsuki will come, with Izuku looking at her and saying, "Let them come." This is when Izuku, after having defeated his mother, would have an eye appear on his forehead. I'm not sure if this is how it works, but I just think it'd be really cool if this happened. The Rene Sharingan would appear, with Izuku having grown massively stronger and realizing that it is true. More Otsutsuki will come for him. Kaguya having been killed, though it might not happen in 1 or 2 years. In a couple of years, they will return. So Izuku would decide that he needs to get stronger, and for the foreseeable future, Izuku would go from planet to planet finding little chakra fruits, as he would go on to destroy planets that don't have living beings on them. So he'd have to harvest a ton of chakra fruits in order to even get a sliver of strength, kind of like the might tree that happens in Dragon Ball. But after more and more time would pass, Izuku would get like a bit stronger with more trees, but ultimately, eventually I can probably see Izuku ultimately failing the humans, but this would be like a couple hundred years down the line, where like the world kind of just ends thanks to the Otsutsuki, and Izuku just falling to the fact that he just couldn't keep up with the amount of Otsutsuki that would come. He eventually would become like a top 5 Otsutsuki in terms of strength, but when all of them eventually end up coming and like there's so many that they start overwhelming him, it just became too much for Izuku to handle, and ultimately the dude would let it die. But if you want, you could just think to yourself that Izuku defeated Kaguya and that was the end of everything, and no one else really cared, so they were just like, just leave him. But whatever you want to choose, this is pretty much where the What If Izuku Was a Otsutsuki is going to be ending. So ladies and gentlemen, if you guys enjoyed this story and you guys are going to be wanting to catch more what ifs on the channel, then leave a like on the video, seeing as it helps the algorithm do so much, seeing as it helps the video do so much better in the algorithm. But with that being said, it has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.